Despite his limited screen time in the original Star Wars trilogy, the mysterious bounty hunter Boba Fett became a fan favourite character who quickly developed an almost cult-like following. His immense popularity carried over into the toy world too, with the demand for Boba Fett action figures often outstripping the appeal of other more central characters such as Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader.
No disintegrations. As you wish.
Where the movie fanbase became rabid for all things Fett following his appearance in The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, the obsession for toy enthusiasts started 1 year earlier, when a small Boba Fett action figure became the first of many Kenner's Star Wars mail-away offers. Yet when the product arrived in 1979, it was not as advertised. The original Boba Fett prototypes from 1978 included a rocket-firing backpack feature, which was removed from the figure before it went into full production. These early test shots have now become the ultimate holy grail of vintage Star Wars toy collecting, with a high-grade example of this prototype action figure selling in August 2024 for over $1 million.
I expect to be well paid. I'm in it for the money.
While many modern-day collectors know the infamous tale of the rocket-firing Boba Fett prototype, the bizarre and storied development of Kenner's large-size Boba Fett action figure rarely gets the attention it deserves. This 13-inch tall bounty hunter also started out with a prototype model that was significantly different to the product that eventually made it to retail shelves. Yet even more fascinating than that is the story of how the creation of these Kenner toys almost perfectly echoes Lucasfilm's development of the baddest bounty hunter in the galaxy, Boba Fett.
Come with me, toy fans.
What if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me.
The Empire will compensate you if he dies. Put him in.
Following the global success of the first Star Wars movie, Lucasfilm quickly got to work on a sequel, and in early 1978 they developed the concept of a Super Trooper. These characters were supposed to fly around on rocket packs and carry an arsenal of high-tech weaponry, and their design was influenced by concept artist Ralph McQuarrie and then finalised by visual effects director Joe Johnston. The primarily white costume was created by Norman Reynolds and the film's art department, and the original design can be seen in this screen test footage from June 1978, footage that also features the legendary Star Wars sound designer, Ben Burtt.
Boba has sort of a radio voice. There's a speaker built into him here.
However, Lucasfilm soon realised that they didn't have the budget to put an army of jetpack sporting super commandos on screen. Producer George Lucas had a simple fix for this, and he instructed Joe Johnston to take the existing costume and turn it into a standalone bounty hunter. At this point, the character of Boba Fett had not yet been created, so George started revising the script, while Johnston began redesigning the costume. Joe proceeded to alter the colour scheme of Boba Fett's armour, and the more subdued palette was a deliberate choice used to visually position him between the white armoured rank-and-file Imperial stormtroopers and the all-black costume of Lord Vader. This colour scheme also had the bonus of conveying the grey morality of his character. Elements of the space western subgenre also informed the creation of this new Star Wars villain. In fact, Boba Fett was actually inspired by Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name character from the Dollars trilogy, with the Mandalorian's cape being a nod to the iconic poncho worn by Clint in the spaghetti westerns. This gunslinger influence is also why Ben Burtt decided to add sound effects of jangling spurs when Boba walked on screen in Cloud City. Meanwhile, at the Cincinnati headquarters of Kenner, the toy company was busy celebrating the highly anticipated release of their first 12 Star Wars action figures, when they received an invite from Lucasfilm. In July of 1978, Kenner's principal conceptual designer Jim Swearingen met with George Lucas in California, where he was shown the Boba Fett costume for the first time. After taking a number of photographs, Jim returned to Kenner and began working on a conceptual model for the new action figure. Kenner was excited about the prospect of offering a figure based on a character from the as-yet unreleased Star Wars sequel, so things began moving very quickly. Jim's first mock-up, which is known by enthusiasts today as the Kit Bash Fett, took the legs from the Death Squad commander, the torso from C-3PO, and the arms from the Imperial Stormtrooper. To add more play value to Boba Fett, Jim came up with the idea of incorporating a spring-loaded rocket-firing feature into the figure's backpack, and this was added to the original prototype by borrowing the missile-firing mechanism from a Mattel Shogun Warriors Raider figure.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Kenner's promotion of this mysterious new Star Wars action figure began in August 1978, and the advertising material used heavily airbrushed images of the Kit Bash Fett model. This initial prototype was also used for product photography, with the figure even appearing on the insert for the first Star Wars collector case, and at one point a vinyl cape was added to the model, but this was later removed. The next stage of development involved the creation of moulds, from which Kenner would produce a series of test shot Boba Fett action figures. The term test shot refers to a moulded plastic example of an action figure that is typically unpainted and is primarily used to test out the functionality of the toy. The first examples of the rocket-firing Boba Fett are called L-slot versions, because the slot in the figure's backpack, which houses the firing mechanism, is shaped like a backwards L. A spring located inside the backpack would be compressed when the red plastic lever was pushed down, and it could then be held in place by sliding it to the left. Then the rocket could be inserted through the hole at the top, and fired by pushing the lever to the right. However, as Kenner's designers continued developing the rocket-firing Boba Fett action figure, their lawyers were becoming increasingly concerned about the safety of the toy. This was because Mattel had released some Battlestar Galactica toys that year, which included similar spring-loaded plastic missiles, and several children were hospitalized after accidentally firing the missiles into their mouths.
He's no good to me dead.
Due to this safety concern, Kenner redesigned the firing mechanism on their Boba Fett figure, and this led to the J-slot version, where the lever could be hooked behind a small tab that had been added to the slot. This feature was intended to prevent the missile from being unintentionally fired, which is something the L-slot design was far more susceptible to.
Maybe I can help you. I am Boba Fett.
In November 1978, Boba Fett made his first appearance in the critically lambasted Star Wars Holiday Special, and even though this television broadcast was universally derided, it did nothing to dampen the excitement surrounding this new Star Wars villain. Quite sadly though, a few days after Christmas, a child died from complications after choking on a missile from a Battlestar Galactica toy. Mattel initiated a missile recall program, and Kenner ceased all development of the rocket firing feature. The design team was instructed to produce the new Boba Fett action figure without the inclusion of this dangerous device. Yet with the annual toy fair being a little over a month away, Kenner did not have the time to get a safer version of Boba Fett manufactured. So they created a carded example of the figure by using one of their rocket-firing prototypes, and simply removing all references to the rocket-firing backpack from the packaging. This is now the only carded example of the rocket-firing Boba Fett known to exist, and it appeared on an episode of Pawn Stars that aired in 2016, where it was valued at over $100,000.
Well, if you change your mind, I got 100 grand.
From Kenner's Star Wars collection comes the Stormtrooper, the Sand People, and all 20 action figures, including new Hammerhead, Snaggletooth, and more, each sold separately. And now, Boba Fett, Star Wars villain with his laser rifle. Boba Fett is not yet available in stores, but you can get him free with 4 proofs of purchase from any Star Wars action figures. Details on specially marked packs at participating stores. Offer ends May 31st. Star Wars action figures sold separately from Kenner.
When these mail-away Boba Fett action figures started arriving later in 1979, many children were disappointed to find the missile permanently glued in place. But you can't deny that this change was the responsible thing to do on Kenner's part, and the figure that we did receive was still very cool. I never quite understood why he came with a Stormtrooper blaster, and his appearance is more in keeping with the simplistic design of Kenner's early figures, as opposed to the improved sculpting seen on the Empire Strikes Back range. Yet the popularity of this action figure remains unparalleled. And it's this widespread character appeal, combined with the rarity of the rocket-firing Boba Fett prototypes, that make these particular action figures the most collectible toys in the entire world. Rumour has it that Kenner's designers were instructed to destroy all the rocket-firing Fetts, but they didn't, and there are more examples in collector hands today than you might first think. It is estimated that around 100 of these figures are in circulation, and that number is split between 70 of the L-slot versions and approximately 30 of the more rare J-slot types. In August 2024, one example of a rocket-firing Boba Fett sold for over $1 million at auction, making it the most expensive toy in history. But this doesn't mean that all the rocket-firing Fetts are worth $1 million. This particular figure is the highest grade, best condition example known to come with the original mailer box, and it is also the rarer J-slot variant. Even though I understand the significance of this piece from a collector's viewpoint, I still think that price tag is truly insane. Especially when you consider that the examples in collections today are not even the original prototype. By definition, a true prototype is the first or preliminary version of a device or vehicle from which other forms are developed, making Jim Swearingen's Kit Bash Fett the genuine prototype. But Jim's model no longer exists. All the other examples are either test shots or production samples. And look, I get that there's a Star Wars tax, compounded by a Boba Fett tax. But when a Palitoy Action Force prototype that was handmade out of wax and hand painted, when that can only command 320 quid at auction, and it's a genuine one-of-one item, the fact that a 1 of 100 Star Wars action figure sample goes for over $1 million is just downright ludicrous.
Ludicrous speed! Ludicrous speed.
My point is that high-end Star Wars collectibles are now bought and sold by people with more money than sense. And just because the 85 grade J-slot Boba sold for 1.3 million, don't ever be fooled into thinking it's actually worth that much, because it isn't. What I won't deny though is that Boba Fett would have become just as popular based on his movie portrayal alone. The character didn't need a famous toy cock-up to elevate his status, but it certainly didn't hurt. Boba Fett was so cool, so mysterious and so intriguing that he only needed a few lines of dialogue to burn himself an indelible imprint into our pop culture consciousness. And the failure of the rocket-firing prototype only served to bolster that reputation among the fans. It's become the stuff of toy legend, which is why I'm surprised that more people don't talk about the unproduced prototype for the large-size Boba Fett action figure. When the Star Wars toy line first launched, Kenner was heavily invested in the 3 3/4 inch scale, because they knew that children would want their action figures to interact with all of the amazing spaceships, and those vehicles could not be cost effectively produced in a larger scale. While it might seem like the norm today, in 1978 this was a big gamble, because previously all of the most popular boys action toys were taller, being somewhere between 8 and 13 inches in height. So Kenner hedged their bets and also offered a range of large-sized Star Wars action figures. The initial selection consisted of 4 different characters, yet when the line expanded in 1979, Kenner wisely chose to add Boba Fett to the range. While most of these figures are much more like dolls than conventional action figures, Boba Fett is a standout toy in this line due to his superior articulation that included knee, wrist and elbow joints, and a wealth of highly detailed accessories. Before Star Wars hit big, Kenner was a pretty minor player in the toy industry, with only one other big success in the boys action toy department, and that was their massively popular $6 Million Man line. Steve Austin's influence looms large over Kenner's 13-inch tall Boba Fett, as the figure was sold in a very similar styled window box, complete with side flap. Boba Fett also adopted the $6 Million Man's bionic eye play feature, that was used in conjunction with the movable rangefinder attached to the side of Fett's helmet. The sculpting is incredibly impressive for the time, and the large-sized Boba Fett comes with a utility belt accessory, a soft goods cape, and Wookiee scalps that hang from his right shoulder. He is also armed with a laser pistol that has a loop attached to allow Boba Fett to sling the blaster over his shoulder. Finally, we have the removable backpack with the simulated rocket that works more like a grappling hook. The missile tip features 4 prongs, and the projectile is connected to the backpack with a length of black string that can be wrapped around a pair of tabs on the base of the pack when not in use. Initially sold in a Star Wars box, Boba Fett was one of only 2 large-sized Kenner figures to be issued with Empire Strikes Back branding in 1980, and the Empire box version of Boba is much harder to find. I used to own one of the later boxed examples, but I sold it at a toy show years ago, and I always regretted that, so I was very pleased to pick up this Star Wars version when I was in Japan last month.
It's the new Boba Fett Star Wars large-size action figure from Kenner. Darth Vader sold separately.
Capture them alive! I'm the best bounty hunter in the whole galaxy. That's why you got the job.
Boba Fett has a see-through helmet with play rangefinder to locate your objective. You can move his legs, knees, arms, even wrists and elbows. His backpack unit is removable.
You have your mission. Good luck. I don't need luck. I'm the best.
New Boba Fett Star Wars large-size action figure from Kenner. Darth Vader sold separately.
This figure is easily the best of Kenner's large size range of Star Wars characters, but it could have been 1,000 times better if they'd followed through with their prototype design plans. The original model looks noticeably different to the finished product, with the blaster in particular being much smaller than the one we eventually received. According to this Kenner specification sheet, the initial plan was for the backpack to feature 3 spring-fired missiles, with 2 short ones and 1 long one. A feature that I have to assume was removed due to the safety concerns surrounding the 3 3/4 inch rocket-firing Boba Fett. This spec sheet also mentions a removable flamethrower and dart weapon that were both later omitted from the figure, as well as friggin' knee darts. Most interesting of all is the reference to electronic sounds and LED lights in the chest plate. It's quite clear that Kenner wanted to make this Boba Fett figure as premium as possible, but I'm guessing they would have blown their budget, so several of these features were scrapped. Yet you can't say that a light-up chest panel on this large action figure wouldn't have been super cool. While Kenner's range of large-sized Star Wars action figures certainly weren't a failure, they were nowhere near as popular as their 3 3/4 inch line. So the company decided to cease production on the large size range, and no new characters were released after 1980. By that time, the 3 3/4 inch Boba Fett was no longer available as a mail-away offering, and he had since been released in the main line on both Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back packaging. Then in 1981, Kenner finally issued his iconic spaceship.
Put Captain Solo in the cargo hold.
Boba Fett's vehicle is called the Slave One, and despite Disney now disowning the name, like that of a creepy uncle who constantly makes family barbecues awkward, it'll always be the Slave One to me. This is a really well engineered toy that has gravity operated wings and a ratcheting cockpit seat, and it also comes with Han Solo frozen in carbonite. Of course, with all things Boba Fett, there is also a rare variant of the Slave One toy, and that version came packed in with a cardboard backdrop that is very difficult to find today.
Prepare to receive cargo.
Kenner's Slave One comes with frozen Han Solo.
Is Han Solo completely frozen, Stormtrooper? Yes, Boba Fett.
Action figures each sold separately.
Place them in the prisoner retention unit.
Slave One has a rear loading ramp,
Prepare for takeoff. Check.
movable cannons, and gravity-operated wings that trigger lock.
On to Jabba.
Slave One with frozen Han Solo from Kenner's Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back collection. Action figures each sold separately.
Before Kenner's original Star Wars line ended in 1985, other rare variants of the 3 3/4 inch Boba Fett action figure would be released. For example, there is the Tri-Logo variant that has the unique colour scheme, and the removable rocket version produced by Lily Leddy of Mexico. Just as the large-size Fett was one of only 2 characters to be released in Empire boxes, Boba also holds the distinction of being one of only 2 mainline figures to appear on a droid's card back. What makes this version particularly desirable, aside from the unique card art, is the fact that this figure came with a unique gold coin, and even loose examples can sell for hundreds of dollars. Fast forward a few decades and Hasbro eventually released the White Armor prototype Boba Fett, in both the Black Series and the Vintage Collection line. But neither of these figures have ever, nor will ever command the same kind of prices as their vintage counterparts. As I look back now at the history of Boba Fett action figures, it seems almost serendipitous that every version was altered from its original design. With each major change, new levels of depth and intrigue were added to the character's folklore. It's a saga that Boba Fett seemed destined for, with even his 1990s Power of the Force figure coming with a rare variant that had half circles printed on the hands. It is a journey that began with the makeover of a white movie costume, a dramatic design overhaul which led to the creation of one of the coolest Star Wars characters ever committed to celluloid. It's a pop culture myth that continued to grow thanks to the infamy of the rocket-firing Boba Fett action figure never being released, and a legend that was cemented in August 2024, when this small action figure broke records and became the most valuable vintage toy in the galaxy. So thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, you can click the links over here to check out some of our other vintage Star Wars content, or subscribe to the channel by clicking down here, or consider supporting us on Patreon, where you'll get access to hours of exclusive content. I'm Tony from Analog Toys, and may the Force be with you.